So, welcome to this month's Evidence of Greatness. And as I talked about previously, this is going to be the presentation where I take the 4 different theories that we talked about in the 4 previous months, and we bring them all together and we talk about how they support solution-focused brief therapy. So we're going to go through a little bit about each of those theories and talk a little bit more about it. So the first thing that I want to do is just remind you of the 4 theories. First of all, broaden and build theory. Second is bioinformational theory. Third is design theory. And fourth is hope theory. So we'll bring each of those back and kind of talk a little bit about how, as we include each of these 4 different kinds of theories, that they help us to see, in some sense, a little bit better. So the first theory is broaden and build theory, and I want to connect broaden and build theory to resource talk. So you'll notice that what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect each of these 4 theories to one of the description components that's consistent with the diamond approach to solution-focused brief therapy. So I'm going to make a connection here between broaden and build theory and resource talk, right? So interestingly, when people go through solution-focused brief therapy, they oftentimes report 2 different outcomes. One, they report feeling better, having what we call positive affect. And the second is they have an increase in hope, right? And I hope that you kind of catch the connection in that language about positive affect. They feel better. Remember from broaden and build theory that when people report when they feel better, their physical vision broadens, but also their creative vision broadens. And in some sense, the resources that are available to them become more prevalent, become more available. They begin to access those resources more abundantly. So positive emotion is not the same as the absence of negative emotion, right? It's not just feeling neutral, but in some sense, when they experience a solution-focused questions, when they answer questions about resources that they have and resources that they can use, they begin to feel positive emotion. That then, as we mentioned, increases their vision, increases their perspective, and positive emotion increases what they call thought behavior repertoire, which means in some sense they become broad, flexible, and receptive to new thoughts, to new ideas, to new ways to behave. And so you can see from a broaden and build theory, it's really, really in line with resource talk. That as I ask people, as I view people from a lens of a particular version of them, I want to talk to the very best of this person. I want to access their resources. That helps them to feel better. And then their thought action repertoires begin to expand. So I hope you can see here that resource talk is a really, really useful and an important way to access change from a solution-focused perspective. And it really is in line with the broaden and build theory. In some sense, it's like we're looking into a mirror and we're seeing ourselves as though in the best light, or we're seeing the best version of ourselves. And again, that then opens kind of our vision to what is possible. So next, we increase our vision of understanding by looking at bioinformational theory. Bioinformational theory, remember, I'm going to link this to the desired or the preferred future. Remember, there are all these stimuli. Remember, this is the theory that is linked to athletics or music, where people practice, right? Where they kind of go into that meditative state and they envision all of the stimuli that might come their way, all of the things like the feel of the ball, the sound of the crowd, those kinds of things. And they imagine then the response that they need to have, right? And they physically tense their muscles. They envision the speed with which they need to have. And again, some of the ideas that are connected here are, they call this mental practice or imaginary practice or covert rehearsal, conceptualization or mental imagery rehearsal, right? From this bioinformational theory. And in some sense, as we walk people through, and we say things like, when your desired outcome is present, what's the first thing that you'll notice, right? What's different about the way that you begin to walk? What's different about the way that you prepare your coffee? What's different about the way that you interact with your loved ones, right? And in some sense, we're doing this mental rehearsal or this mental practice with their preferred future in mind, right? And what's interesting is that details that are stored in long-term memory of the brain they're organized as a set of stimuli propositions, and they begin to become linked as response propositions. So if we can get into that memory and we can access that memory, and if we can talk to them about how that memory will influence the future, then in some sense, we're changing their response propositions, right? And then I think this is really interesting. It says performance can be enhanced by repeatedly recalling response propositions or a particular stimulus situation and modifying these responses to represent perfect control and execution of a skill. So the more we can go over when such and such occurs, when your desired outcome is present, what's the perfect response for that? What is a response that's in line with behavior that's consistent with the preferred future, right? The desired outcome being present, right? And so kind of using this metaphor again of vision, if resource talk is looking into a mirror and seeing our true selves, and then bioinformational theory really is kind of like looking into binoculars and looking forward and saying, if such and such were to occur, how would you need to respond and what would be different, and right? And they're looking far into the future and rehearsing the exact things that they need to do in order to behave consistently with their desired outcome being present. So it's enhancing vision in a slightly different way than resource talk might enhance vision. That gets us then to the third theory, which is design theory. And this, I'm going to connect a little bit to a microscope, right? So the instances or exceptions, I'm going to put this into history of the outcome, right? So remember, design theory says you have all of these things in their initial state, these raw materials, and you're trying to get these things to a final state or to something that's consistent with the desired outcome. And in between those two states, there's a process, a transformational process that occurs, which is changing an existing situation into a preferred situation. This requires imagination and formulating a plan that deals with uncertainty and what the future holds. But it also talks about how we're obligated to use the current information and predict a future state. And they talk about, the founders of this theory talk about how everyone can and does design, right? And in some sense, looking at the history of the outcome and looking under that microscope and saying, what did it take in order to achieve that history previously, right? When you had designed something that was just right, how did you design it? Who noticed that you designed it in that way? What difference did it make to them? And what was different about you when you were living consistently with your desired outcome, right? And we want to really put that process under a microscope and kind of pull that process apart in order to say, if you were to design that again, or if that were to come back, what would be different and how would that be different? And so again, kind of utilizing this metaphor of vision, under the microscope, looking at instances, times in history where the design was exactly the way that you wanted it to be. How did that come about? What helped to create that design? So next, the final theory then is hope theory. And hope theory, we're going to make a comparison connection to, again, vision. But in this sense, we're going to look at it as eyeglasses, right? And we're going to connect hope theory to scaling, right? So according to Snyder, he says a positive motivational state that is based on an interactively derived sense of successful agency or goal-directed energy and pathway or planning to meet these goals, right? That's what hope is, right? It's this motivational state. It's a state of being. It's even thinking about myself wearing eyeglasses, right? This is just how I see the world, right? But in order for that state to be motivational, we kind of have to be looking, where do we want to go? Do I have the resources, the strengths in order to get there? And that's one of the reasons why I'm connecting it to scaling, because in some sense we're saying, where are you on the scale? What are you seeing currently through your eyeglasses? How did you get there? What's keeping you there? How are you not sliding back in time? But then you also convert that into goal-directed energy, and you say, if you were to move up the scale just one step, right? If you were to just look a little bit further down the road, what would be different and what would you notice, and how would you be behaving at that point, right? So this is a future-oriented vision when we use scaling, but it isn't the binoculars of the preferred future when things are at their optimal, when the desired outcome is totally present. In some sense, this is just one step closer to that. And so again, this is eyeglasses that help me to see just a little bit further, but they don't help me to tell the future, right? So you can see how each of these, as we view these theories in connection to vision, what we're seeing, we might be looking into a mirror and seeing ourselves. We might be looking into binoculars, seeing far into the future. We might be looking in our regular eyeglasses and seeing just a little bit further, but we're seeing with clarity. Or we might be looking under a microscope, right? According to hope theory, hope is always present, right? This is why we start with, what are your best hopes? This is why we hold the belief that hope should impact the way that we view our clients. This is why we believe that hope should impact the language that we use, right? That we should utilize the client's language, but also really importantly, we should presuppose that hope is present, right? In addition, we shouldn't abandon our questions ever, even if the client says, I don't know, right? In some sense, we're looking through the eyeglasses of possibility, and we're helping them to put those eyeglasses on as well. So that is the 4 different theories that we've talked about. If you missed any of the other evidence of greatness presentations about any of these theories, please go back and listen to those, because I explained each of those theories in great detail. But I wanted to show you how these 4 theories kind of come together and talk about why we use these kinds of descriptions in solution-focused brief therapy. From each of these perspectives, change can happen, right? If it's Broaden and Build theory, change happens through positive emotion. If it's bioinformational theory, change happens through mental rehearsal. If it's design theory, change happens by envisioning difference or change, how we take the current state and move it to a different state. If it's through hope theory, it's about viewing things hopefully, utilizing agency to bring about change, right? So you can see how each of these 4 theories, they support the diamond approach to solution-focused brief therapy, and they help us to utilize, they help us to help our clients to achieve the transformations they're looking for. So I hope that that was helpful. I am looking forward to hearing about what you think about the 4 theories that support solution-focused brief therapy as we try to help our clients to create lasting change. Until next time, I will see you later.